So recently, I sat down with Thomas Crown, who roasted my new book, Enter the Dom. Just kidding. As a friend of Mario's, he actually sat down and gave us a critique and some excellent feedback about our book, especially coming from the perspective as somebody who leans more vanilla, but really resonated with dominance as a mental trait, and our book being a solid self-help guide for men. So if you're curious about some of the behind the scenes of writing a book and what might be in this book for you, then this episode is a great listen. As always, I'm Brandon the Dom. Let's dive in.
Hey, what's up, folks? MarioTheDom here, and today we have something a little bit different. So I'm here with my co-author, Brandon the Dom, sex and relationship expert. Hey, Brandon.
Mario, how you been, man?
Amazing. What about you?
I'm doing well. Excited to talk with Thomas today.
Yeah. And today also our third guest is Thomas Crown, which is one of the also good friend of mine, but also which is more important. No, just kidding. One of the top Daygame and dating coaches in Europe. He's been around a while. So hey there, Tom.
Hey, Mario. Great talking to you as always. And Brandon, nice to meet you. And
You as
looking
well.
forward to today.
Fantastic. So this is kind of an interesting thing because when me and Brandon started writing the book, Enter the Dom, we're always thinking like, who's this book for? You know, the first answer was always, well, I wish somebody handed me this book 20 years ago when I started my journey. But when I started my journey 20 years ago, it was also a dating journey, not just like a sex exploration practice or something like that. So where do I think this book is interesting is not just what people can learn about meeting other people to play with, but in the traits that we think to develop your dominance will help you also your dating life. So, Thomas, you had a chance to go through the book. What are your quick thoughts about it?
Fantastic job, guys. Well done. Like, I know how much time and effort it goes into writing books. So well done. You should be proud of what you've created here. Really good book. And so what we were saying just before the call, we were talking about how does someone like myself as a Daygame dating coach bridge to you guys who are into the sort of BDSM scene? And what we were talking about was that dominance is such a massive part of attraction. And so when you go and approach a girl and she is more naturally submissive, she has those tendencies, then she tends to light up when she meets that guy with that dominant side of him. And so I kind of came to the book and I was reading it and thinking, am I going to get more of is it more like a self-help book? In game dating, we might call that inner game. And then, or is it going to be a literal like how-to practical guide of the BDSM scene? And I think that it really melds them together really well. And that the guys who are coming at this book from my side will probably be interested in the dominant side because it's such a massive part of attraction. But then some of them will be interested in the BDSM stuff. And later on today, we could hopefully talk a little bit more about that, about what kind of guy might like to go further, what kind of guy I am. So excited to talk about it.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. This what did you say is just interesting because when we finished, we actually thought this book as a solid self-help book disguised as a sex book, And I mean, when we talk about the bridge, been playing with Daygame too, and one of the things I noticed was when I was talking to girls in the street, one of the tenets is, oh, you need to be dominant and confident. And I was like, okay, but what dominant really means, So the bridge is like understanding and expanding your dominance in and outside of the bedroom. That was the pillar on which this book was written on. Basically, if I could explain exactly one thing that helped me becoming better in and out of the bedroom, what would that be? And that's dominance, So that was ultimately the goal for us in developing this project. this is more, I think, for the crowd of people that are interested also in self-development a little bit, not just like give me the 3 steps to become a more dominant man, something like this. But yeah, there are definitely some of the things that I think a lot of people coming from all the angles will actually find interesting, especially the part that is before the bedroom. And we can also talk about a little bit more the bedroom or any other places if you want to have some extra spicy fun, you know?
One of the things that we really focused on in the beginning was having that inner dominance piece and those traits that make a dominant man, whether you're doing this in the BDSM scene or you're doing this in general. We tried to bridge that gap, showing them that, like, yes, this is a role that you can play in the bedroom, but it's more about a trait that you embody both in the bedroom and interactions with women, but in your life as well. And I think that's our like through line of how this is both self-development and also getting better in the bedroom.
Yeah. Do you know, I guess the listeners can't see this, but when you said that, I was nodding really vigorously and in total agreement, because I think that as well, having this trait and living your life as a dominant man, even other men will pick up on it. I think that when you meet another guy and you sense he has that inner confidence and that dominance, you're communicating with him on a sort of sub-communicating level where you seem to just understand each other and know what the other person is going to do, how they're going to behave. So it's especially, you can tell, I think, especially when you go from, say, like us in the UK, we travel more to Eastern Europe or the Balkans. Balkans is a great example where the guys are just naturally more dominant. And I think that you step off the plane and you just get this sense of, oh yeah, okay, we're all on the same wavelength here. So I think it's really, it's like you were saying, it goes from the bedroom to your life, but I think it goes out to everything in your entire life.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we also discuss in the book for some guys that, and this is, I think, works for everyone, whether you're interested in better dating life, better life in general, better BDSM life or dynamics. A lot of the things that that we talk about stems from your development as a man and your recovery, because most of the guys that will actually benefit from this book is people that need actually recovering from being too polite, being too nice. There's a section of the book where we talk about the nice guys, because in my experience, that's be a huge roadblock for most of the guys. That they're like, oh, I wish I could be like that, but some of my internal beliefs stops me from behaving this way. One of the funny things that you mentioned, the Balkans, for example. So if you take an Englishman compared to a typical Serbian or Croatian guy, the Serbian Croatian guy doesn't have the British politeness, but it is not a sign of being weak or nice. It's just they're very assertive by nature. They're very dominant in asserting their leadership. And I know we're talking a little bit about these container words, leadership, but what is specific leadership? Is not, sorry, excuse me, what do you like? They're very like, I want this. They're very good at asserting what they actually want and desire. Meanwhile, and this goes for, I think, a little bit everybody in the West. You, Tom, being a dating coach, a dating coach, probably you've seen it with the guys that have some challenges in bringing up what they want. What exactly do you want? It's something that we talk in the book, and this is something that we try to explain to people. Like, be clear what you want, and don't be afraid of it. And you probably seen it with the guys that would like to talk to that girl, but they're like, no, I don't think she's into guys like me, or stuff like that.
Absolutely. I think it's a dominance thing. It's also an entitlement, but a healthy entitlement, of course. The idea that, and I think just taking a tangent for a second, but guys get wrapped up into the ideas of things like push-pull, or even some guys in the past would have said negging. So I have to kind of give her the good and the bad together in what I say. But then at the end of the day, you're still the man who has to go in there and tell it exactly what you think and how you feel, and your essence, which I'm sorry, it's like kind of a metaphorical. It's just it's not, doesn't have a distinct definition, but that essence has to have directness, dominance, and entitlement to be like, I'm the man, I'm here to pick you up, which is like, that's like, if we want to split things into push pull, that's like a million times pull and very tiny. There's no amount of push that you could balance that with. So guys have to develop, like you were saying, this ability to know what they want and just being like, I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to not take, because you can't force anyone into it, but sort of demand from the world what I like.
Yeah, I think there's a level of being able, one, to identify what it is that you actually need and want, and then being able to express that to somebody. And then the important part that I found was being secure no matter what the response is. And that's what basically drops your neediness. Because if you're going in and you're like, I, want to date you, or I want to do this sexual act with you, or whatever it may be, and you get butthurt on the back end of that no, instead of being secure and being like, okay, I can find this elsewhere, or I can meet this need on my own, whatever it may be, that doesn't allow you to actually lead the interaction, like to have that dominant frame. The way that because Mario was talking about earlier of, the nice guy and being non-assertive. I used to be married, and in my marriage, I was leading most of the time, but there was times that I was hiding my own needs. And so I had to learn how to express those in a healthy way, and then be, okay with whatever the outcome is of that, and still be able to lead. And so when I went into dating, I realized that if I'm able to enter into that interaction from that position where I'm okay with whatever the outcome is, it always worked out better for me.
Yeah,
And yeah,
completely agree with all that.
it also in dating we also talk a lot about outcome independence. You have to enter into approaching without expecting outcomes and everything. And this is the same like with this aspect. When you're like, I'm doing this and everything without having how can I say this? Without everything that's gonna happen is gonna be fine anyway. So this is one of also the things that is discussed while we might actually start to talk a little bit more specific chapters in the book if you want, Thomas, something like that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, let's dive into the book, because after all, that's what the people want to hear about.
Yes.
Okay. So there we go. Well, I mean, we've got this fantastic plan to work from, so let's dive in. Because I wrote some notes down as I was reading the book, and then we're going to go through those today. Also, I think this is an interesting podcast because this is the kind of thing that never gets posted online. It's always, this happens beforehand, and then, here's the finished product, and you didn't see how the sausage was made. So this way, I think it'll be interesting for the listeners and the readers also. So you guys put into the notes, we were talking about actionable exercises. That was one thing I liked in the book, and that's generally something I like in self-help books themselves, are these moments where they engage the reader and they say things like, okay, literally go get the pen and paper now and write down these things. So I think what helped and what would be helpful throughout the book is that you put these actual exercises out into like pop-up boxes and give it a name, so call it the Enter the Dom training manual, exercise number 1. And how in the book you're asking guys to write down things like their personal values or what they find arousing. So it goes like, exercise 1, 2, 3, and then by the end you have this journal. And maybe as well it would help that at the end you have a just a recap of all of the exercises, so that people can look back at their journal and be like, oh, that's what I wrote. I feel like turning it into a string of exercises and numbering them as well will encourage people to do the exercises, because in my opinion, that's really helpful for people to get as much as they can out of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah, I
found as
mean,
well, like, oh yeah,
sorry, no, please continue.
I was just going to say, when I've done that previously with books, as in, normally what happens is I read them twice. The first time I just read through without without writing anything down, but then the second time I really make notes, and that second time of reading a book is really like where everything hits.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. Something that we developed these books as a natural part of the chapter, especially when it's help me out, Brandon. I think where the one where is the take 100% responsibility of your life. I think that's the one you developed it personally. But probably, yeah, something we can think about in the future is having some self-coaching help at the end where you can keep track of your answers on the things in time, because also things take time to change and you have to review them from time to time. It's not that so far you've convinced yourself, oh, I shouldn't really be doing this, and all of a sudden you change your mind and it's gonna stick with you forever. This is a slow adaptation process.
Yeah, I think speaking to that feedback, Mario, there was one piece in the book, I believe in the deprogramming section, that we wrote about something you mentioned in your journal, and it may be helpful in the future to like sort of have like a model of how we've gone through this process, of like journal entries or examples of this exercise.
I think that would be really useful. I think what would be great is every time you introduce a new exercise for the reader is that you say, this is what we would have written down. Because also I think that we sort of get onto this a bit later, is that someone like myself, I'm reading the book from the self-help side of it rather than the practical BDSM side. But I don't know anything, I don't know very much about that. So it's like, I don't actually know what I could write down, because you talk about the sex menu thing, but it's almost like, it's almost like if you said, oh, I'm an Englishman, so I have to write down a menu of food. So I guess I could write down beans on toast and I could write down fish and chips. And I don't know like many things to put on the menu. Whereas Mario, you're Italian, you probably know about more meals than I've ever had. So, you'd be able to write down a ton of different things. So I think what would be really helpful is for you guys to put what you would write in your journals, so that we can start to get an idea of what's possible. I think an extra thing as well is you'll get some guys coming into this who have very deep-seated desires, but they're deeply shameful about those desires. And if you guys were to write down something that in the past you might have been ashamed of, it will give them the freedom to be like, oh, okay, it's okay to do this.
Yeah, that's a great point, because we also make that's also something you pointed out in the notes that we exchange about the shame. And I think me and Brandon have a couple of stories about shame, but there are so many things that you could be ashamed of or unaware that you are ashamed of. For me, for example, the idea that people would know is actually fun, but the idea that people would know that I'm a sexually active person, that I don't apologize for having this need and wanted to satisfy it, was causing me a lot of internal anxiety. I was literally ashamed of me being me, and then I swung entirely to the other side of being, I'm a super full degen, I live at the fringe of society. So it's like when nice guys try to compensate them by becoming uber douches, this swing from one extreme to the other is the classic overcorrection. And of course, we should, trying to describe all types of shame, I think would be impossible, but definitely we can talk a little bit more about ours. I would definitely say there's been a few of mine that I had to overcome. The shame of, having my sexual needs, of asking for my sexual needs to be met, or even one of the shames that they had was trying to be the man. You know, it was a shame that they didn't had so much experience. So I was always doing the same stuff because trying new stuff that was even brought up by my sexual partners was something that was scary, no? Because it was out of my lane. So I literally had to become comfortable with the terms of, dude, you're gonna suck because it's the first time, but it's gonna be fun. You know, sometimes trying new things, if you place value in learning new stuff, you don't really focus too much on the negative side that, yeah, you're not gonna be a master at it at your first swing.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think something else that we tried to do, there's the erotic stories that kind of break up the book, and then there's also a chapter on sexual dominance, and we try to show some things that are possible, that are meeting more readers that um, aren't aware of this world where they are, instead of trying to show some of the most extreme things or the entire spectrum of BDSM that you can do, because it's very wide and it would be overwhelming for a new person to see all of that and be like, okay, that's kind of go into a frenzy, especially if you want to act on all of those. Where we tried to show, you know, a few steps ahead of where you may be now. But it's something in your feedback that may be helpful in the future is, and tied to shame, is those stories that we had where the experience went totally wrong and we felt a lot of shame, or we're tripping up a lot as we were trying to develop ourselves.
Should I, because should I move into that part of my feedback then? It was about the sex stories.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'll preface with all of this with, like, I'm quite cynical with this stuff. And guys, a lot of guys who, you know, get into game, they have low self-esteem. So as the coach, you also need to be a little bit wary of where people are coming into their interaction with you about these things. Not talking about you guys, but that's why I'm trying to show, like, why I come to these things as a little bit cynical. And because when I read the stories, like the sex stories, ultimately they are success stories. There's no way around it. It's always going to be a success story. And the thing that the thing I don't like, I don't actually like thinking about other men having sex. And that's where the cynical part comes in, when I'm like, oh, this guy's just trying to get in my head and make me think about him having sex. And obviously, I know when it's you guys, it's not really like that. But that's kind of where I feel that for me to enjoy the story, you have to buy my enjoyment by giving more self-deprecation, little silly moments. Like, for example, I'm sure, I think in one of the stories, Brandon, you talk about the cuffs that you bought. And I was thinking, oh, that would have been like a funny moment to mention how, like, when you first started out in this world, you were so embarrassed to go and buy those cuffs. And you, like, ordered them in secret at night with all the windows closed from the internet, just hoping that, like, the little old lady next door wasn't going to see the delivery coming in. So that's kind of what I would have liked to see, little humorous tidbits and things, small moments of self-depreciation. And honestly, I've fallen prey to this myself as well. Like, when the first book I wrote was like a story of my first year in Daygame, and I didn't include enough of these self-deprecations. I didn't include enough of this humility. It was just win, win, win.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. I mean, definitely would make. I think if we would make a self-deprecation or fumbled stories book, that would be a lot of fun stories to laugh at. You know, because like neither me or Brandon or I think nobody in this part of the world actually became a master out of the gate. You know. In my opening story, how I entered into this world, there is a little bit of fumbling, you know, may not know even to do something that most of BDSM community will consider spanking basic. Me straight going for a super mega slam. That was my first fumble in the world, you know. But again, yeah, I see your point. Of course, we tried to with those stories to add some pepper, some spice, adding something that, okay, but how this that you just say, how this transform, into real life. When I meet someone and want to do something of those things, or what is available on the menu to do, what is available for us, that we are entering as a newbie in this world, so I can start to run my ideas around new fun ideas to experiment, you know?
Yeah, I think Mario, you also did a good job, especially in your stories. I remember when editing them, um, kind of like we talked about these traits and like here's it in practice. And I know like in your stories you try to break down like certain points of like this is a BDSM pillar right here, and this is why I'm like doing it right now in this scene or in this interaction with the woman.
Yeah, that was at the end of the day, when I was writing the stories, I was mm, trying to talk to my previous self when I was even starting before dating and everything. If I wanted some inspiration, what I would have done, you know? So tell me something that you do so I could follow it, talking about manuals and steps, step by steps to follow. But
Hmm.
that was to give more or less some ideas on place to play, what are the actual things that you could do, a little bit of the things we're into, because some of the aspects that we don't touch perhaps in the book is the sea of possibilities that you can have, what type of dominant you want to be, because that is something like, even in your uh, day game style, let's call it like that. What is your type of dominance? Are you
Hmm.
someone that, like someone we know was very famous in the day game community, wanted to verbally dominate the sets all the time, uh, Nick, or someone that is more uh, physically dominant, so has more body language dominance, close more the distance, has more intense eye contact. So you see dominance expressed in and out of the bedroom in different styles. And that what we tried to do was scratching the surface in trying to present what was available from our side, at least. Of course,
Mm.
everybody's welcome to freestyle, welcome to explore and see what works and resonates with them.
Mm. I think so. A couple of times in the past, some guys have sent me this link, and you do this online quiz, and it gives you what percentage of
Oh
different.
yeah, the
Okay, I can't remember.
bdsmtest.org test. Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably one of those things where I don't know. Maybe you guys go like, "Oh, that old thing, that's been done to death." But even that test or a link to it or something similar would be really useful to let people scratch the surface and understand. Oh, this is what's out there. That's what's possible.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, the test, of course, it's free for everybody to take if people want to. I think it's kind of good to give you an idea. I mean, to me, it was always kind of getting the vibe of what I was into. I don't know your experience, Brandon, with it.
Yeah, it's kind of like one of those like old Facebook quizzes that you take and it just
Yeah.
basically reads your horoscope for you. It's like the very like dipping my toe into the arena.
Mm.
To
But
me,
that I think
sorry.
I
To
was
me,
just
it
gonna.
was always funny because I was using it as an opener with girls to talk about, what they were into. Because most of them were very vanilla, or vanilla is someone that isn't is into standard things, okay, not BDSM stuff, and they wanted to
Mm.
dip their toes, but they didn't know what BDSM was all about. So hey, just answer these questions and let's see what you're into,
Mm. Yeah, so that would be. I think that would be quite helpful then for the reader to have a link to that.
Okay, that's something we can definitely think on.
Yeah. So moving on to the next point I had, there was, and this links into what we were talking about personal stories, is I guess I have to talk before is that, I've read a lot of self-help books before. And so for me coming in, reading the sections on leadership, especially on leadership, for me, it's like, oh yeah, cool. That's to me just to take for granted. Probably for a lot of guys who are totally new to either of these communities, that will be really helpful. But I think what would add another layer on top of it is where you guys come in with your personal stories of how you used that element of leadership, for example, and also, like we're saying, more stories where, yeah, you messed it up. One thing I put in the notes is that to avoid what I would call secret success stories, where the story goes, oh, I messed everything up. Oh, but in the end, everything actually worked out okay. Instead, it's to be like, I literally am kicking myself because I lost this girl or I lost this opportunity because I didn't know what to do properly at the time. And I took that lesson and thought, I'm going to let this drive me on to success later on.
Mm-hmm. I see. Well, definitely, I think this solidifies even more the idea for a fumble book. Like you might heard of success stories book. This is the book where we tell you everything that went wrong, and it's 5 times bigger, by the way. No, look, you make a great point because a lot of the things we've learned, speaking for myself, Brandon, I'm taking the freedom to include it into this, but please correct me. A lot of this comes from a lot of self-reflection on failure. A lot of things that we tried didn't go as we planned, especially when you work on scene creation. It is like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And it turns out a lot of things don't manifest in the way you were hoping they would. Or sometimes even you didn't show up in the way you should have showed up. Like instead of being this leading strong man, I didn't feel it. So I was like, meh, hey, what would you like to do? Instead of, look, I really want to do this, and this is what we should be done. And then you reflect upon that, but why did I behave this way? Or why we had this situation? And every failure was part of the piece that was actually building the solution, which is transforming yourself um, into a better dominant man. Ultimately, that was the goal that we wanted to achieve with the book. So definitely, they didn't make it for the book just because of land, But from my side, at least, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of stories where things didn't go as I planned.
Well, let me be just clear for the listeners that they are in there. It's just a personal. They're in there already. It's just a personal preference that I would have liked even more because I don't want to get the wrong idea across.
Yeah. One extra point I want to talk about leadership, because we were talking earlier about kind of the Venn diagram of who this book is for. And I come much more from the BDSM scene and world there. And one of the mistakes that a lot of new dominants make is this idea of dominance being more domineering or overpowering or only getting my needs met. I'm a tyrant. And so when I wrote the leadership chapter, trying to really hit home that leadership is not only getting your needs met, it's more of like being a king where the needs of the entire kingdom, in this case, you and your woman, they are both being met and you're leading sort of the vehicle to do that. And I see time and time again, I lead a couple munches here in Austin, and those are like kinky meetups. Everybody gets together, talks about kink, and a lot of newcomers come to that. And there's this confusion all the time. And so that's something that we wanted to showcase. And I think it was something that I learned even before I got into the BDSM scene when I was married and fumbled a shit ton in my marriage trying to lead that and breaking down millions of times, crying to her because I can't figure it out. So bringing that element into the book.
Yeah, Brandon, I really agree with what you were saying there because being dominant, it's more about being a leader, like you said, than a tyrant. And to be a leader, you have to have followers, and for them to follow you willingly, they have to, the question, is it better to be loved or feared? And in this case, it's being loved. And I think that this is a really, like, in my opinion, is one of the key, let's call pillars or tenets of the book, and I think as it should be, because I'm concerned that some guys will get into this thinking that they're going to use this knowledge to get back at girls in some way. And I think especially that came to mind when you guys talk about the master-slave relationship or being worshipped. Because that's where I feel like, okay, look, if you worship, you're religious, you love your God, essentially, you love them. But then there's also a way of being worshipped out of fear. So I'm kind of interested to know how that plays out in the community.
Yeah, so a master-slave dynamic is probably like the most extreme version of a dominant submission relationship that you could have, where the submissive is 100% giving herself over to serve the dominant's needs. However, and this is a point we try and make clear, and we probably could have made it clearer in the book, specifically related to this extreme version, because she is giving over 100% to the dom and serving him. He has taken 100% responsibility for her and for her life. And that's the only reason that agreement stands.
Gotcha. Is there, maybe you could give like an example of something that the master gets the slave to do? Not sexual, just like in her daily life.
Yeah, a lot of these dynamics, they're known as 24/7 dynamics, and the slave is living in with the master. And I would say actually 90% of it is not sexual. He could be having her do household chores if they're more like a 1950s dynamic, or could be serving as furniture, could be pretty much anything. That's why we always come back to like, what do you want as a dom? Because I'm giving examples, but a lot of times people are like, oh, that's the dynamic I'm supposed to do. We're like, no, it's literally what you want. And then you're asking the submissive for that. And as long as you're both in agreement, you can have that. That's the actual dominant part, is leading with what your desires are.
Okay. And then the 100% responsibility part is you as the dom having to be very empathetic and seeing how what you do affects her. Is that right?
100%.
And
100%.
okay. To what extent is there a gray area where you will want her to do something and she's willing to tolerate it, but you wouldn't push into a red zone?
Yeah. And that is really comes down. We try to communicate the trait like of awareness and also building empathy with your submissive, because there are those areas where like, okay, I want this desire. And if I ask her to do that, she'll probably do it out of a desire to please me rather than her own desire to do it. And at least one of the ways that I try and practice dominance is using it as a tool, almost like self-development for her, to try and build her up, make her a better person through this. I'm actually in a dynamic now where I am helping her with her meal plans and like her workout, and I go work out with her. That's part of our dynamic. It's a rule that she's to do those things, but it came from her desire of like, I want to be a better person. I want to do these things. And I'm just kind of facilitating that happen.
Gotcha. I think that was something I put into the notes, was that it almost makes it sound like therapy.
There is.
Well, you will be surprised how many people take BDSM instead of therapy. I'm a huge advocate for both and doing both at the same time, actually. But one of the pillars of the book is about love, and I loved writing about love. But literally, it's everything that you do, it has to start with love. Especially, this is my message for the guys that are a little bit bitter out there, and they, like you rightfully say, that might want to use those tools to get back at women. But why would you get back at someone that is literally putting their trust and their submissiveness and their gift into your hands? It's literally like you're pointing a gun at yourself instead of at others. And one of those things that love teaches us is start to not just love others, but love ourselves. So when you start doing things with love, when you bring this energy into the dynamic, everything changes. And I don't talk about love, this Western concept of, a man and a woman, that they marry, have kids, and they look at each other with glitters in their eyes. It's more like a type of connection and feeling that you have while interacting with someone else or something else. Okay, so while you're in that state, you can use this energy to push someone into a better position. Because the amount of situations where I had someone exploding in tears because they had some past trauma that they resolved inside themselves thanks to the dynamic. And by the way, if you have something like that, I always encourage, that you speak with a professional. Having a great dom and a great dynamic, for sure, it's amazing, but nothing beats some professional help. But again, the times that they had people exploding in tears, girls exploding in tears because they had some very bad experiences previously, okay, with domineering doms or some other stuff. When you do things out of love and care, I simply think that amazing things happen. And whether it's a 24/7 type of dynamic, so is a continuous reinforcement of this energy into the dynamic, or something more casual where you are kind of working on a project together with your sub, let's call it like that.
Yeah.
When you're um, when you work coming from love, it's completely different. The dynamic is different. The results even are different.
How then, can I ask this question for you guys then? Is that sounds like something that's going to be for the sub, that's going to help them. But then how do you help yourself to reach that point where you can help them?
So everything that happens is an exchange. Okay. So in my case, let's get personal here. In my case, being entitled with such responsibility literally influenced a lot of my awareness. It was literally a training in awareness because I had to pay more attention. I had to be paying more someone like me that has absolutely no attention for details. I had to start to pay a lot of attention to details. Like when someone was not really feeling it, you had to read that expression, you had to feel that energy. Meanwhile, before I was like, let me just plow through. I was like, no. Look, I get the feeling that you're not extremely comfortable with what I just said. Is me interpreting right the situation, or is just an impression? So starting that gift, which is the submissiveness, helped me improve a lot my awareness, and it was some sort of training wheels for leadership. Because okay, so I have to do this. I want to make this scene happening. How do I have to show up in order to do that? It's like when you're about to do your day game session and you have to psych yourself a little, pop in the mirror, like you got this, That helped me a lot with those two traits.
Gotcha.
You wanna add something, Brandon?
Yeah, I just want to clarify the question. Are you asking like how the dynamic helps us to develop?
I guess I was looking at it from the perspective, well, this kind of book that you guys have written will help guys to get to the point where they can help people. But then how, does that person also come into the community and get help from other DOMs to help them reach the point where they can help others? I'm trying to work out how you can get yourself to the point where you can, because I think tying this as one like grand theory together, I personally think it's really important that you guys or we or everyone stresses the fact that it's going both ways. So just trying to find the words for this.
I mean, it absolutely goes both ways. You nailed it on the head, because there is no dominant without submissive, and there's no submissive without the dominant, And a funny thing that, please go ahead.
I was going to say, because I really want to avoid guys coming into this and thinking that they're going to get the revenge fantasy. And I think a way to try to square that circle is that you tell them that an intricate part of this experience is helping other people.
Yeah.
So if you come at it like that, Okay, so then if you want to help other people, you have to have the ability to help other people. So
Yes.
then how do we get the ability? That's where my mind is sort of on this journey here.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the first chapters being like taking responsibility for yourself. It's like concentric circles, because you have to work on yourself and get your shit together before you start helping other people. Otherwise, when you go to help them, you don't either have the capacity or have really any ability to lead another, like if you can't lead yourself. But one of the beautiful things about the dynamic is as you start to do this, like in your very first steps of trying to lead somebody else, women are great mirrors and like feedback. They're not going to give you direct feedback of like, this is where you're fucking up, but rather when the interaction is not going how you want it. And I seen this, going to like Daygame, like when you go to talk to a woman and you don't have the interaction that you want to have, they're not going to tell you like, hey, you fucked up in this part. It's rather the whole entire set went to shit, right? It's the same thing when you get into the bedroom. You know, Mario was talking about like creating a scene and leading that. There's plenty of times like I had this master plan laid out, and I go in and try to do the first thing, and I'm like shaky hands, weak commands, fucking up, and I just have to throw that entirely out the window. And most of the time, those interactions went bad, but sometimes you're able to recover, and it's in those shitty moments that you learn, okay, if I actually want to become this leader, become this Dom, I'm going to have to take this feedback and like keep bettering myself. I think for the guy that like went in and is trying to be the revenge Dom or like get revenge, they're going to be met very quickly with feedback of like, this is not going to work.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So it's very much a learn by doing situation.
100%.
And also committing to improvement.
Absolutely, commitment to improvement. Something just to add. Also, I think a lot girls at masters are reading the vibe, and this is something that people that have these revenge fantasies don't consider. Is that this type of energy that they carry somehow during conversation, during plays, it will pass through. So. I don't know what is the actual term to this, giving the ick or something like that, but people will notice. And what I would recommend, I mean, I had a couple of friends that had this red pill rage face, this bitterness, because I've been lied about women. It's like, look, man, you have two ways to go about this, as far as I can tell. You can decide to put the battle axe under the ground and live the life that you want without carrying this acrimosity, this anger towards somebody that did nothing to you at the end of the day. Or you can decide to just keep it and ruin your own life, because at the end of the day, this is what it boils down. So you decide to want to be happy and make others people happy, or you just want to be hurt and hurt other people. So
well put.
this is the question that ultimately you have to make yourself. And this whole book is gonna help in asking you a lot of questions. Because what you want, all those kind of things is. I really hope that people, what they will take home from reading the book is they will find time to discover more about themselves. Because ultimately, I think also for Brandon, and I think for you with your day game journey, Tom, this was all a big self-discovery process for me. No?
Agreed. Well, there's the old saying by Tom Torero, which was that game or day game is just the self-improvement community in disguise.
Yeah. Definitely. I can tell that there was a lot of self-development for me. I mean, not just in terms of fashion-wise, black leather jacket and biker boots. Because it was fun when me and Brandon were talking about the BDSM fashion angle, how to be a better good-looking Dom. But it was just like, okay, one of the funny things where the two communities overlap is, for example, voice, tone of voice, right? In the game world, you have to speak loud and, pace yourself correctly, not sound like a robot. While in the BDSM community, when you're giving orders in the bedroom or where you're having your place, it's literally kind of similar. You cannot give shaky commands. You cannot be. So this is one of the things where the two things come together, and it's like, oh, actually learning that skill there transferred to having the skill there. No?
Absolutely. Should I move on to this other part of my notes now? This conversation about shame and maybe even disgust as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think we've touched on that already. We talked about how guys might be ashamed of their desires, and it's going to help them to map them out and to think about them. Probably end up talking about them with other people. And one thing I wondered though was that you guys did touch on this on the book about shame being an inbuilt part of society. And by my own sort of, I don't know if this is what's agreed on by the psychologists or the scientists or something, but at least in my own sort of head theory, humans have this shame or disgust response to things, which, as long as most people in society have these responses, they help to keep the society together. So to what extent can society only sustain a certain amount of things, people who are into the things that you guys are into? So the kind of what I was trying to say was that even though our emotions, our responses are built on evolution from thousands of years ago, and how in the modern world, a lot of it is redundant. So for example, you can go and do a day game approach on a girl and you feel approach anxiety, but if it doesn't go well with her, the tribe, in quotes, isn't going to know. You can just go and approach another one. But part of that emotional response is kind of correct, that we don't want to get rejected. So I'm thinking, how does this play out? And sorry that this is a very broad question, with the communities that you guys are part of, where part of that shame response is possibly correct.
Okay, this is perhaps a little bit above my pay grade. Look, the word of BDSM has been explored by plenty of psychologists. I mean, at the beginning, it was considered something. If you were into BDSM, there was something wrong. No, that was the aspect. Then today is considered actually adults having fun and playing games. So this degeneracy aspect has been officially removed. So there are plenty of therapists that work with into the adult sphere with the sex and everything. So they know what they're talking about, okay? And they definitely seen this word. So there are parts of this that definitely are you wouldn't talk about the BDSM with your barista while you're getting your morning coffee, for example, right? I mean, unless you're in Berlin, which it's kind of the vibe of the city. So this is something that you do, and you do it for you and the people you play with. Okay, so those are plays. It's not something that defines your personality, because one of the points in the book is how you could see some of those things and have a complete disgust reaction, because it's something that is perhaps being planted inside of you by your culture or even by nature, But at the end of the day, it's just a reaction that you have. It's like when you have an anxiety attack. You have an anxiety, but not necessarily the situation triggering it is correct. Maybe your thoughts are playing a game on you, or your mind is playing a trick on you. So that's why knowing what you want and what you find with is so important, because you can then use that as a North Star to define, okay, this is fine with me, or this is not. Me, for example, when I started in this world, I wasn't really comfortable. I was a little bit ashamed of other people seeing me naked. So going to a swingers club and doing stuff with other people looking at me, oh gosh, no, that's not gonna happen. Then I was like, I mean, what's the point of it? It's like, well, because I grew up in a place where you shouldn't be seen naked publicly. There was a shame belief that was installed in my head, and then I was like, but am I fine with it? To them, like, well, I guess so. Unless people start to make comments loudly and point and laugh at me, then I have absolutely no feelings about it. Then you see, you start to dig everything that's in your head. Or a couple of friends of mine, they had what is called in the industry the Madonna whore complex. That I was talking to them like, girls that do this stuff, absolutely not. I don't want to have nothing to do with that. And I mean, you quoted the great Tom, rest in peace. One of the things they was talking about was go read My Secret Garden. I forgot the author, by Nancy something, and you're gonna have a bigger window into female sexuality. So this thing that has been installed in your mind that a woman cannot be a great person and a voracious sexual being at the same time is completely false. This dichotomy is incorrect. So when you sit down and you analyze your thoughts, what do you want, where your shames and disgust come from, actually you're going to start to automatically see a lot of them are in contrast with each other and automatically resolved, or at least give you some food for thought on where start to work on that.
Yeah, I just have a couple quick points to add to that. Some things that we try to add in the book. One is social awareness. So being able to study the tribe that you're embedded in. And when we say tribe, like in ancient history, those tribes were very small. But now we have the entire globe as our tribe, and there's sub-tribes that you can move between. And so trying to figure out what are the value systems within that tribe, and do you actually align with that? So in the book, we also try and get guys figuring out what their own values are, so that when you do get to this bedroom stuff and you start to have shame around this, okay, am I having the shame because it's in going against my own values, or something that somebody else told me that maybe I don't share that same value with them? Because it's something I always like to emphasize is like, these fantasies that you have in your head, you don't have to act on all of them. And there's ways that you can act on them in safer, tamer ways, especially if they're going against your own values and you're saying, I'm ashamed of that part. But if it's something that society has planted in you and you're not believing in that, that's actually something you can unravel so that you can, safely express yourself.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, if I can also add a little bit on top of that, we talk about society, like society has planted things on you. We want to make sure that the guys understand society is not just this conspiracy from great puppeteers, great figures, I mean, it could even be a trend on things that few people talk about on X. It's like, oh, girls that do like this are absolutely not worth your time, king. You see, when you don't have a strong opinion on something, maybe you're like, okay, that's something that starts to see through your mind, and you start to adopt that belief of this tribe that you're following. So again, that's why it's so important. So when you know what you want and what your values are, you can actually agree to disagree with people, still be friends. Not necessarily I need to share the same exact view with you. Like a lot of my friends, they don't share the same view that I have about sex and sexual dynamics. But this doesn't impede us to hang out and have a drink or have a good time. It's just like we realize we have different wants and needs and beliefs about things, and that works perfectly fine for all of us.
That's kind of a question I put into the notes. I'd just be interested to hear from you guys. How much do you tell your friends and family about what you're into? Because there's a very similar question that happens in Daygame, which is that guys get into Daygame or they read about game or even red pill stuff, and they're very excited to talk about it with other people. But for example, I would normally tell guys, yeah, it's great to have wings and guys who are also into this to talk about it. But you're probably better off saving yourself the trouble when your colleague at work says, well, what did you do this weekend? A friend of mine said, you should think about what's called the receptionist test. And it's the, if you could say it to your receptionist in an office building or somewhere where you live, then it's going to go down fine with most people. So for example, if you said to someone, oh, you know what, I'm just feeling so good today, I'm just going to talk to a girl in the street, I'm just going to go up and talk to her, I think most people, the receptionist, would say, yeah, go on, you go do that. But if you said to them, you know, I'm going to do this many approaches this week and I'm going to record it and I'm going to like listen to the recordings, etc., keep spreadsheets and stats and stuff, they'd say, oh no, you cannot do that. So I just wondered how that translates to you guys.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm talking for myself. I mean, Brandon is pretty public, even with his face out there. In my case, it's just like when I talk to, I mean, even my parents know this because my mom once was going through my stuff and she found my BDSM bag. So all the tools of the trade, you know. Once with my dad, we were driving to hardware store and he was like, what do you need all those ropes for? I mean, yeah, you're learning how to make knots, and I was like, kinda, you know, but I'm not tying any boats anytime soon. You know, it's more for humans, and you know, with my friends, of course, if they're my true friends, so they know every aspect of me. And sometimes we even laugh about that stuff, you know. So it's just it is what it is. I decided how I want to live, and me being open about this stuff with people in my inner circle. It's something that it has to do. If, of course, in other spheres like my professional job, I don't start the meeting. I was like, hey guys, you know, hope you had fun this weekend. Me personally, I had you know, a couple of sex slaves in my dungeon, so yeah, it was all great fun and giggles, you know. So what about you? You know?
Yeah, I think a large part of it's like being socially aware and understanding how you're going to be perceived in whatever context you're in. With my friends that are close, yeah, they all know very deep details about certain things. I had a group of guys that I did a men's group with for a long time, and they know everything. But family, they know certain parts of like being non-monogamous, but they don't know like I'm going to sex parties and all of that jazz. It's kind of like knowing the context of like who you're speaking to. Family doesn't necessarily need to know that information. But like if you're going to a doctor or a confidant or somebody, like you're explaining everything because they need to know that information to better to serve you. So like what is this relationship? When you go into the meeting with your boss, it's a professional setting. They don't need to know a bunch of details about, you know, your extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, you can share it with ChatGPT if you want, but I wouldn't share it with the boss, you know.
Yeah. Do you know what?
All right.
I think I've actually got through all of my notes.
Yeah, this was a blast, you know. I think also let's try to keep it short because there's a lot of information to pack for the guys there. Shall we leave final remarks and where people can find you folks?
Absolutely. Okay. So I'm available at thomascrownpua.com. That's where you can find all my blog posts and all the information about my books, my podcast, which I guess if you're listening to this on my channel, you'll have already known where it is. You can find me on X at CrownDaygame. And yeah, like I said, this will be, if you're listening on Brandon's channel, then this will also be posted on my podcast on Spotify. That's called the London Daygame Podcast.
Excellent. And I am Brandon the Dom. You can find me at brandonthedom.com. Thomas, I want to thank you a bunch for the feedback on the book. This is really helpful for both of us, especially as first-time authors, because we were doing the best we could, but definitely can improve. And that book can be found at enterthedom.com.
Excellent. Oh, I'll make sure I'll put the links to your guys' sites and everything and to the book into the show notes.